the Vice Chancellor, represented by the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic, my birthday mate, Professor Mrs. Akeredolu-Ale, the keynote speaker, other dignitaries in the House. I hope there are students here. I'll be surprised if there are, given that exams are going on. But if they are here, great Unibites. Okay, so thank God you are here. I must apologize to the Vice Chancellor for arriving at the time I did. A sudden development made it impossible for me to leave earlier, and also made it impossible for my wife to be here with me. So I'm jealous of the keynote speaker. She had to stay with a visitor who suddenly turned up in the spirit of we are, because the African spirit of not being warned before you are visited. I think so. So I'm glad at the point where you ended. It's quite interesting. At the time this lecture was allocated, I was afraid that many speakers might end up repeating one another. And in my case, there are quite a number of things that the keynote speaker touched upon that are also in my paper. I had a lot of difficulty starting to write this paper for two reasons. The first was that it was not clear in my mind why the organizers chose to give me a lead paper in a conference of experts in the humanities. I could see no other reason than the interaction I've had over the years with individual members of the Department of Communication and General Studies of the University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, and my usual tendency of dabbling into discussions that hover around the humanities and the need to humanize the sciences. When eventually the department made its plans known, and the theme of the conference, I saw that there was room for amateurs like me to participate in the conference. So it is, I was glad that I arrived early enough to see some of the things that the keynote speaker took us through, and I really appreciate the effort he had put into preparing this conference, preparing to start the conference. I cannot pretend to be an expert in the midst of all of you. Oh, okay. I know, it's fine. So I will share with you my thoughts on this subject as a learner, and my principal reason for being here is to learn from all of you. For that reason, I intend to be here even tomorrow so that the learning can continue. I therefore want the audience not to expect any erudition on this topic, but simply lend me your ears on the thoughts of a learner whose main purpose, as I said before, is to learn from all of you. There are some definitions that are important for this paper. It is taking, part of it you already saw, and probably I can, in fact, skip some of them without boring you or losing anything. But let me take the Advanced Learners Dictionary of English Language definition of science. And I think that was exactly what Prof showed. Knowledge about the structure and behavior of the natural and physical world based on facts that you can prove by experiments. There are other definitions of science, and some of them quite interesting, especially in relation to the things you have heard from the first speaker. The first two definitions appear to refer to the physical and biological sciences, while the third appears to accommodate all the sciences, including social sciences, the theological sciences, and even the humanities. We'll come back to this point at a later part of the paper. If we push the third definition further, the full meaning of science would seem to be the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world following a systematic methodology based on evidence. Scientific methodologies include the following: objective observation, measurement and data, possibly, although not necessarily using mathematics as a tool. According to the same source, scientific methodology includes objective observation, measurement and data, as I said earlier, evidence, experiments, induction, reasoning, to establish general rules or principles or conclusions drawn from facts or examples. It also includes repetition, critical analysis, verification, also testing, critical exposure to scrutiny, peer review, and assessment. At this point, we must stop to consider the definition of humanities from the same source as for science. First, the 8th edition of the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary. While I was making this reference, I also checked the 6th edition, which I bought for my first child when she was in her final year. And I found that there had been so very many new words that were not in that edition. So English language is lending itself to, I don't know if it's improvement, but to modernization and to probably confusion, as we may tend to find as part of the unintended consequences. According to this source, the humanities are the subjects of study that are concerned with the way people think and behave. For example, literature, language, history, and philosophy. For Wikipedia, humanities are academic disciplines that study aspects of human society and culture. In the Renaissance, which the first speaker referred to, the term contrasted with divinity and referred to what is now called classics, the main area of secular study in universities at the time. Searching further through the lenses of these sources, in the late 19th century, the German philosopher Wilhelm called the humanities the spiritual sciences. That's a label, isn't it? And the human sciences, and described them simply as those areas of knowledge that lay outside of and beyond the subject matter of the physical sciences. On the other hand, Heinrich Rickert, an early 20th century neo-Kantian, argued that it is not subject matter, but method of investigation that best characterizes the humanities. He contended that whereas the physical sciences aim to move from particular instances to general laws, the human sciences are idiographic. That is, they are devoted to the unique value of the particular within its cultural and human context, and do not seek general laws. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the American philosopher Martha Nussbaum emphasized the crucial importance of education in the humanities for maintaining a healthy democracy, for fostering deeper understanding of human concerns and values, and for enabling students to rise above parochial perspectives and the bondage of habit and custom to become genuine citizens of the world. Dogu, on the other hand, here we go again, makes a serious effort to get those of us not too familiar with all that humanities entail and their relationship with other fields of study to understand better. And I quote, "Humanities are academic disciplines that study aspects of human society and culture. In the Renaissance, the term contrasted with divinity and referred to what is now called classics." I think I mentioned that before. The humanities include the study of ancient and modern languages, literature, philosophy, history, archaeology, anthropology, human geography, law, politics, religion, and art. Human disciplines like history, folkloristics, and cultural anthropology study subject matters that the manipulative experimental method does not apply to, and instead mainly use the comparative method and comparative research. Other methods used in the humanities include hermeneutics and source criticism. I provided a definition there for that term. The origin of universities and the need to integrate science, technology, engineering, and I added, as some of us have listened to and also wish others could do, arts in addition to mathematics. So instead of STEM, let us begin to think STEAM. The word university originates from the term universitas, which originally meant any collection of professionals in a guild of organization. The motivations behind these corporations were to provide their members with protection from rival groups and enable price regulation and monopolies. The source is there. From all accounts, the University of Sankore, otherwise called the University of Timbuktu in Mali in Africa, was one of the world's oldest universities. But the Western world progressed very rapidly in the 12th and 13th centuries in the establishment of universities, most of which taught theology, logic, Greek, Latin, rhetorics, and literature. Some few taught mathematics, medicine, and earth sciences. In the order of historical precedence, in formal learning in universities, the arts and humanities, if there is a distinction between them, were followed by the physical sciences, while the social sciences arrived at the scene later in the 19th century. I was reading the biology book that I used at my prelim year at the University of Ibadan. And part of the book, which I missed at that point because I was reading to pass the almighty June exam, actually stated that if the book was written 20 years before 1960, 200 years before 1966, the word biology was not existing then. That shows you how young some of the sciences are. In fact, the science in which I specialize is a very small aspect of crop protection, which itself is a small portion of agriculture, which itself is a small portion of science in general. The earliest Western institution that can be called a university was a famous medical school that arose at Salerno, Italy, in the 9th century and drew students from all over Europe. It remained merely a medical school for a long time. The first true university in the West was founded at Bologna late in the 11th century. It became a widely respected school of canon and civil law. Note that at this point, we are not yet talking of the sciences and technology as we know them today. Until the end of the 18th century, most Western universities offered core curriculum based on the 7 liberal arts: grammar, logic, rhetoric, geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, and music. Students then proceeded to study under one of the professional faculties of medicine or law or theology. Final examinations, as I just said, were grueling and many students failed. To give you an idea of what university was like in the 70s, for those of you who are only 30 or 40 years old. After the preliminary studies was a unique entrance into the university, and you had to write exams, and it was exceedingly competitive. And in Ibadan, it was only in the sciences that you could come in through that process. And you know, the failure rate was so high that it was a very difficult, grueling process to pass through. And then there was a dreaded subject, zoology, which was one of my 3 major subjects. And zoology was notorious at that time for failure. So, you know, at the end of the session, when the department decided to allow us to come to them to see the details of our results after Senate released them, it was a queue of all of us, each one going in with trepidation, and quite many coming back with tears, and some jumping for joy. Because if you failed, you reverted to your school certificate position without anything to show for the money spent as well as the time that had been spent. And then the zoology master, when it came to my turn, told me my mark, and I said, "Sir," he said, "What's wrong with all of you? Do you expect to fail?" And we said, "No, sir, but the generality is to fail. The common thing is to fail. So we didn't expect we will pass." And then he said, "Okay, all of you in this particular set, you have given us food for thought." I think things changed after that, because even those that scored 75% in the subject had to doubt that it was their number the teacher made reference to. So to say that it was grueling at that time was a true statement. Perhaps not so much because the students weren't serious, but because exams of all the things that you have been exposed to from September of one year to June of the following year was examined only in June. There was no course system. So you can imagine the difficulty in preparing for such examination. The first modern university in Europe was the one founded by the Lutherans in 1694. The school was one of the first to renounce religious orthodoxy of any kind in favor of rational and objective intellectual inquiry. And it was the first where teachers lectured in German instead of Latin. German, as far as the ancients were concerned, or any other language, not Latin or Greek, was vernacular. So this innovation quickly spread, and later on, many German and other American universities copied this. In the later 18th and 19th centuries, religion was gradually displaced as the dominant force as European universities became institutions of modern learning and research, and were secularized in their curriculum and administration. These trends were typified by the University of Berlin, in which laboratory experimentation replaced conjecture. You see that science is coming in for the first time in the course of this talk, and only in 1809. Now, progress was made, and the first universities in the Western Hemisphere were established by the Spaniards, and the University of Santo Domingo in what is now the Dominican Republic, and the University of Michoacan in Mexico. Now you can see from all of this that these are the things, some of the things that those who say that we are young in Nigeria in this area, sometimes they use this to justify our slow pace, but in reality, it is true. Now, you can see from all of this that the owners of universities in those centuries were ecclesiastical. So the Catholic Church fostered university education and promoted it very, very deeply. Then the available knowledge at the time was basically the humanities, and were greatly favored in university education. Now, the reformations that followed Luther's thesis in the 16th century led to rapid changes in university education. As seen from this extensive quote above, language used for teaching was liberalized. The sciences began to receive academic attention, and social sciences entered the fray in the 20th century AD. So where do all this, what do they add up to? Given the sequence of events in the highest institution of learning worldwide, the humanities propelled thoughts and reasoning to a very high degree, such that intellectual pursuit for human development and achievements were fostered by universities. Perhaps this is the reason why a doctorate degree in any field of studies, either humanities, science, or social sciences, is called in full Doctor of Philosophy, a phrase which denotes ability to reason at very high levels. Great thinkers like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, St. Augustine of Hippo, St. Thomas Aquinas, Descartes, Democritus, Epicurus, Karl Marx, Lenin, among others, have all affected our concept of life on earth in many ways, some for ill, some for good. In the same way, Pythagoras, Copernicus, Galileo, Darwin, Gregor Mendel, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, Pierre and Marie Curie have all played very major roles among a long list of great scientists before us, understanding and in helping our understanding of the physical world and matter. It is worthy of note that many of these thinkers and scientists are philosophers one way or another. The scientific study of the human body by anatomists and the study of the human mind by psychologists and psychiatrists tend to complement each other by trying to ensure that the human being is free of neuroses so as to stay healthy. The material body and the spiritual mind of man need to be healthy for him to discharge its functions in a healthy manner. More and more evidence is being gathered or perhaps I should say garnered, because of the slow process, to show that the peace and tranquility of mind fostered by good spiritual development and meditation promotes good health of the physical body as well. The good of one ensures the good of the other. While science studies matter in its various forms to understand their relationship to one another for the good and development of humankind here on earth, the philosophy and theology try to understand the spiritual aspect of human beings and propagate ideas that enable him to understand his inner workings better. Although some philosophers have been materialistic in their outlook, many have worked towards a deeper understanding of the complexity called humankind. Philosophically, they have tried to see him from the prism of composites of matter and spirit. Those who have combined philosophy with metaphysics or theology and allowed the light of theology to guide them additionally seem to have been able to produce results that make the human person more understood as a rational being composed of matter and spirit. Such philosophy underscores the immaterial nature of the human soul, its separation from the material body at death, and its continued survival at the spiritual realm thereafter. Many religions of humankind consider that the soul lives on after death, but with recompense for its deeds when united with the body, while some religions and belief systems accept the doctrine of a place of punishment or bliss forever after death. Others postulate that the soul reunites with some other body to be reincarnated for further life on earth as a punishment or another opportunity for further purification until the individual becomes perfect and attains beatific vision and bliss forever. Islam and Christianity, two major world religions, preach the doctrine of life after death, but without reincarnation, and propose it for its adherents to believe. It has been demonstrated that humankind is religious by nature, since no society, no matter how sophisticated or primitive it is, that does not have a religion. Even one compelled to deny adherence to one, like the Roman Empire tried to do for 300 years to Christianity, religion has always survived. History shows that religion survives its oppressors and demonstrates the superiority of a belief system that transcends the grave. Time and time again, philosophers and scientists that adhere to this fundamental truth about humankind have tended to see further than their counterparts who don't. Our personal experience and intuition point to this truism and tend to make us ask questions like, where do I go from here? What happens to me when I die? And so on. The answers are provided by the major religions of humankind. Now, back to the main issue of the paper, interaction between science and humanities. As an older system of thought, the humanities try to understand science through the prism of utility, and sometimes suspicion. The arrival of science and technology in the learning system aroused admiration of some and suspicion or outright opposition of a few. Since universities developed with the active support of ecclesiastical authorities, certain fundamentalists among the ecclesiastics have sometimes allowed their imagination and understanding to stray. The Copernicus-Galileo discovery of the spherical nature of the planet Earth and its rotation and revolution around the sun led to serious conflict between religion and science, theology and science. It also marked the beginning of the erroneous feeling that science and religion were incompatible. Pope St. John Paul very recently in 1993, strongly demonstrated in his encyclical Fides et Ratio, that is faith and reason, that faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. And God has placed in the human heart a desire to know the truth. In a word, to know himself, so that by knowing and loving God, men and women may also come to the fullness of truth about themselves. John Paul II. By the way, I hope you all know that he has been canonized for some time now as a saint. And recently his body was exhumed and was found not to have decayed. In this encyclical, the Pope took humankind through the journey of the Christian faith from the beginning, relating that journey through the various phases and the encounters with the various cultures, through processes, history, and tendencies of various epochs, showing how ancient philosophy had, by dint of human reason, reached conclusions that were compatible with revelation. He also demonstrated how philosophy had assisted Christian philosophers to develop theology and find common grounds for seeking the truth. He appealed to common sense, that if truth is the object of scientific research and philosophical speculation, and God is ultimate truth, science, philosophy, and revelation cannot be contradictory. Any apparent contradiction will mean lack of sufficient data to reach the truth, which will require the humility of seeking further to move closer to the truth. Making reference to the deposit of Christian faith and revelation, he showed the heights of thought reached by philosophers and theologians who were obedient to the enlightenment of the Holy Spirit and used reason to make mysteries of faith more understandable. Such philosophers like Thomas Aquinas especially did not see any contradictions between faith and reason, and were not afraid to deploy reason to explore revelation further, to make them more attractive for the human mind to grasp and love, as well as objective truth. St. John Paul also mildly scolded those who are so enamored by the giant strides of science and technology that they desire to throw any moral or ethical considerations to the winds in experimenting with human beings or with some other sensitive matter in the world. He also reminded humankind of the threat to the survival of man, that unbridled pursuit of science and the negative use that has been made of some discoveries have constituted, leading to fear of the danger of human extinction, which Prof. who spoke ahead of me also made reference to. That leads me to the next part of this paper, the need to humanize and tame science so as to prevent self-destruction by human beings. The humanities have the capacity and tendency to make human beings wiser and more virtuous by their nature. Religion, philosophy, anthropology, history, literature, and others present the past in a manner that can prevent human beings from falling into error in his judgment of reality. These subjects should be taught in schools, colleges, and the universities to widen the scope of an understanding of budding science students so that they can know themselves better and have an insight into the monster each one of us is capable of becoming, left to our own devices, without the intervention of ethics, morals, and religion. Some interaction of humanities to tame science is necessary for the benefit of the species called Homo sapiens and the planet he lives in, that is on the earth. They only need to look back. We only need to look back and see what disasters have been wreaked on the planet by the various activities of science and inventions based on man's discoveries. Science without ethics and morals may lead to doom. We only have to remember Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where little boy, a code name for the atomic bomb arising from discovery of the power of splitting the atom, decimated the two cities, causing the death of over 210,000 human beings at once, and other deformities thereafter resulting from radioactivity. The permanent threat of a nuclear war is reality constantly staring us in the face. Ecological disruption as a result of biocides, those are pesticides, is a reality receiving ongoing attention. Chemical warfare has been surreptitiously deployed in wars. Global warming, a consequence of human ingenuity from scientific knowledge, is currently trending as one of the unintended consequences, using the phrase of the professor who spoke ahead of me. Who knows what is next? It's therefore reasonable to deliberately promote the knowledge of the humanities to all students instead of stamping them out of the curriculum like Nigeria foolishly did for history at the secondary school level until common sense eventually prevailed. I would like to conclude by thanking the department for bringing me into this conference and for allowing me to participate in the conference from the point of view of science. I have always had a very serious respect for the humanities because of the role that they play in the life of a knowledgeable man or woman, for that matter. Philosophy helps the mind to think deeply, and the humanities remind us of the mistakes of the past and how to navigate through this world if we are careful and we are wise enough to know who we are and how little we are and are capable of achieving, how little we know compared to what is yet unknown, and to stop the arrogance of arrogating to ourselves the things that God has put there for our finding and for our knowledge, and also not trying to stamp out God from the equation, as Europe, which has benefited so much from the Christian religion and from philosophy and theology, so much so that their laws are basically Christian laws, and now stamping out religion to the point that it is now a crime to put a cross in a classroom in some parts of Europe, nor to speak publicly about Christ or religion. It is actually, you invite a friend to supper. If it's not somebody that still believes, it's likely to be offended if you begin to tell him about things that relate to his life and the consequences of his actions hereafter. So if we then divorce science from, if we divorce the arts and humanities from science, I dare predict that we will be heading for doom, and God forbid. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Please, let's put our hands together for him again. Science without ethics and morals may lead to doom.